If you aren't an avid consumer of internet video game critiques, then it might surprise you to learn that Prey 2017 is secretly considered to be one of the greatest games of all time. I know, right? Talk about a game that's often regarded as excellent, but only had the cultural staying power of a competent but kind of forgettable middle shelf game. The ones that usually get left behind with the times. A lot of nominally credible people seem to think it's brilliant, and there's always someone coming out to defend it from the poor reception it got at release. Chances are, you clicked on this video because you're curious about this Prey game that everyone seems to love, but few seem to talk about anymore. And now that you're here, I can tell you why this title captured the imaginations and memories of the emphatic few who stuck with it. You play as Morgan Yu, Vice President of Transstar Industries and lead researcher on the Talos 1 space station orbiting the Earth. One day, she wakes up on the station with no memory of how everything completely went to ruin around her. An alien species with dangerous psychokinetic abilities called the Typhon has taken over Talos 1 and killed almost every staff member on board. They then begin multiplying rapidly, diversifying in form and threat. If left unimpeded, the Typhon threatened to take over the Earth and eliminate all human life as we know it. Guided by an artificial intelligence that speaks in her voice, Morgan must figure out the events that led her to this moment and use that knowledge to destroy Talos 1, dooming herself and the station's survivors, but also saving the human race from extinction. Or she can study the Typhon and use neuromod technology to assimilate with these creatures and kill the humans herself. The choice is up to you, because like many of the most widely respected but commercially neglected titles in gaming history, Prey 2017 is an immersive simulation. Ironic, huh? When given a game that puts player choice above all other priorities, most players choose to ignore it. Immersive simulations, immersive sims, or imsims, aim to give players the opportunity to solve problems in any way they can imagine, using the broadest interactivity offered by the game. If my definition sounds like vague nonsense, it's because immersive simulation is more of a game design ideal than a discrete arrangement of genre staples. Any kind of game can be an imsim if it prioritizes player agency. The quality of an imsim is determined by whether the developers can anticipate the weirdest problem-solving approaches players can come up with, and then reveal that, yes, your dumbass idea was secretly genius the entire time. The Deus Ex, Thief, and Dishonored games are considered imsims, each of which offer open-ended quests for players to tackle creatively. It's not just stealth action games, though. Some games with complex mechanics have imsim qualities, including many well-regarded CRPGs, sandbox RPGs, open-world games, and BioShock games, apparently. Seriously, I had no idea people thought these were supposed to be imsims or faux sims, or anything more than just first-person shooters with some bells and whistles. Regardless, Prey 2017 epitomizes this game design ideal from the very beginning when it gives you the glue cannon, one of the most brilliant pieces of equipment to ever fall into a protagonist's possession. The glue cannon is like the gravity gun from Half-Life 2, the plasma cutter from Dead Space, or Harry Dubois' shitty brain in Disco Elysium. They're not just the tools you use to beat the game, they're the words you use to speak the game's language, the nouns that drive the game's verbs. These iconic instruments are the media through which the game's intentions and emotions are communicated. Isaac Clarke fights terrifying necromorphs with the methodical precision of a deep space engineer. Harry's pain and alienation are revealed through his erratic personality, and Morgan Yu's scientific mind is articulated through a tool that privileges her strategic problem-solving and limited combat capabilities. When Morgan gets into a fight with the Typhon, particularly the small and agile mimics, the glue cannon can gum up their elastic bodies, keeping them still for a pretty long time. You can regain control of a chaotic scenario and take the time you need to smack these immobilized crabs with your wrench. The same trick works on phantoms too, since plastering them with glue keeps them from teleporting away or wailing on you with kinetic blasts. I like to glue the corrupted operators too, since it jams up the thrusters they need to fly. Perfect for wrenching. The glue cannon is indispensable for beating the increasingly powerful Typhon, but its functionality doesn't stop there. The glue cannon was originally conceived as a convenient sealant tool for quick repairs to Talos 1 infrastructure. You see glue used to jury-rig fixes for damage to the station. Then, after the Typhon outbreak, glue was used by survivors to barricade doors. Because the material is designed to be highly durable and non-conductive, the glue can put out fires, block exposed electrical junctions, and even create platforms strong enough to support Morgan's weight. She can protect herself from environmental hazards while also creating makeshift stairways to areas she wouldn't be able to access otherwise. It's kinda ridiculous. A lot of the maintenance architecture on Talos 1, and thus secret rewards or entrances into otherwise obstructed areas, can only be reached by climbing on impromptu ladders made of glue. Fight thoughtfully, push the limits of what seems possible, and consider how your experiences explain what Morgan's life aboard Talos 1 must have been like. Then again, I could use numerous scenarios as analogies for Prey's expansive creativity. The problem you'll encounter most frequently, aside from the aliens who hate you, is a locked door. You want the tasty goodies inside, right? Well, you can unlock the door, either by hacking it or by exploring the station to find the keycard or door code needed to open it. Hacking is pretty quick, pretty convenient, if you've already upgraded the ability to the appropriate level and didn't think the neurobots would be better served with something else, like lifting heavy objects or swinging your wrench harder. That isn't always a problem since exploring is pretty compelling in its own right. Roaming the station can lead to gameplay and narrative progress that may be far more entertaining than desperately trying to open a single door. Your reward for engaging with the story is a little extra special when you find a useful keycard or door combination as a bonus. You just have to retrace your steps and try to remember which door was opened with which key. But if you're feeling impatient, some doors can be circumvented entirely, either through exploring the surrounding rooms for a back entrance, or by using the glue cannon to roam the maintenance architecture. The station infrastructure offers great points of egress, especially if you have a liberal definition of what counts as a walkway. They also house power stations, so if a lack of power is keeping you from making progress, then there's your solution. Maybe it's not a technical problem as much as it is a big stupid object blocking your path. Now, Morgan could jam 5 to 11 needles worth of alien goop into her eyeballs to get the leverage bonus needed to lift those stupid objects. Like with hacking, it is just simpler that way. However, if that's not how Morgan wants to spend her limited neuromods, then she can just grab a recycler charge and reconstitute whatever was in her way. See, Prey 2017 doesn't have boring grenades that just blow up or make a big flash. It has cool, sci-fi grenades that won't blow big holes in the spaceship you live on. The recycler charge, get this, sucks objects into a miniature singularity, completely denatures its complex molecular composition, and then spits out the raw materials they're made of. Put these raw materials inside a fabricator to craft ammo, suit repair kits, more recycler chargers, or even more neuromods, so you can still get the skills you need to hack the door or move the heavy object anyway. Just make sure the recycler charge doesn't destroy any of the stuff you need, like healing items, new weapons, or parts of your body. I'm pretty sure those work better when they're still attached to you. Or, and this is what really elevates Prey 2017 to GOAT status, if you're paying attention to the environmental storytelling and diligently reading the emails on the station's computers, then you might find out that a certain door opens every 30 minutes when an operator roaming the level has to get into the room. You can just mosey on in after something that already has access. Hopefully this exhaustive explanation of the hypothetical ways to enter a room shows just how meticulously crafted this game is. Not only are there numerous solutions to any given obstruction, but each solution exists downstream of interconnected systems that reward resource gathering, ability management, flexible thinking, persistence, and the willingness to scrutinize little details. No matter which component of the game captures your attention, Prey 2017 gives you the chance to find a way forward using what you like best. Though, it's not above constantly teasing you over how much easier your life could be if you could lift a little more, jump a little higher, or shoot a little straighter. Speaking of which, doors aren't the only thing blocking your progress. The Typhon that took over your space station have been growing in numbers, size, and overall danger. The Phantoms start to burn, electrify, multiply, or spew toxic miasma. The Technopaths turn defensive machines against you, building an entourage of operators and turrets. Then this horrifying monstrosity starts chasing you down the moment you think you've gotten the hang of killing the space aliens. Morgan isn't really equipped to handle this many violent encounters. She is a scientist, after all, and not like how Gordon Freeman is supposed to be a scientist, but is actually a combat-ready beefcake who just happens to have a PhD in mad science. Morgan is a nerd, and she fights like one too. She's not very strong, she's not very experienced with the security weapons, and she can't take that many hits before falling over dead. When I and a lot of other people first played Prey, a common complaint was that each gunfight felt like a war of attrition. The Phantoms and Mimics could do so much damage, while your attempts to aim with the awkward shooting controls usually left you feeling like a nerd-shaped punching bag. Morgan was better off running away from her opponents, as trying to stand her ground just got her laid out on it. Basically, you never felt like you survived because you were the best killer on Talos 1. You survived because you were the last thing in the room to die. Living by the skin of your teeth as you step over the corpses of your employees really drives home how catastrophic it would be for the Typhon to get to Earth. It's a pretty clear incentive to destroy the station before they do to all of humanity what they've been doing to you for the first few hours of the game. Thankfully, Morgan doesn't have to shoot like the Doom Marine to beat the Typhon, because if you're playing the game right, then Morgan has the smarts to outwit any Typhon she encounters. It's almost always better to run away from a powerful enemy than to get too proud and shoot through the pain. The Typhon have miserable object permanence, so stealth and its upgradable damage bonus quickly become your best friends. Once you've regained the element of surprise, your arsenal makes up for how your worthless simian body can barely stand toe-to-toe with advanced alien biochemistry.
Are you admiring my morphophysiology?
I can go into more detail about the psi abilities, but for the most part, they feel like a Typhon-themed optimization of the things you're already doing throughout the game. Morgan can interface with objects in the distance, navigate her environment creatively, and deal damage comparable to that of her weapons. I mean, summoning flame geysers is just self-evidently cool. See, I really like the combat in Prey because no matter how you choose to play, you get some substantial options for your strategy. Dishonored is a great game, but by tying the morally upstanding ending to a playstyle that doesn't let you use your sword, most of your gear, or a lot of your abilities, you lose out on so much of what makes the game cool. Yes, the good ending should be difficult. No, I don't think it should take as many gameplay options off the table as it does. In Prey, there's no correlation between your morality and the abilities you want to invest in. Whether you stick to human skills, Typhon skills, or try to get a mixture of both, you don't have to quarantine yourself from the fun or natural pace of your character growth just to avoid some judgmental dialogue at the end. There are narrative and gameplay repercussions to splicing Typhon DNA into your human body. It's not a completely neutral decision, but it does not define who you are more than your concrete actions in the story. Prey's morality instead ties into a larger discussion about Morgan's background, her role in the narrative, and whether or not she can follow through on destroying the station and its surviving inhabitants. If you're the kind of person who likes to pay attention to get their narrative fulfillment, then Prey is almost unmatched in the characterization department. Hacking computers, listening to audio logs, and following some of the interesting side quests lets Morgan slowly piece together what life on Talos 1 was like before the incident. She can track the petty quibbles of office workers, a hilarious commentary on how the banal bureaucracy of a desk job always follows industrialized society, even as they explore the majesty and wonder of space. They're still stuck doing shitty office jobs because that's just a part of what space exploration entails. There's a clear class divide between who gets to stare out into the beauty of the cosmos and who gets to soak in the fluorescent lights and recycled air from their workstation. Staff can even be heard mocking the inspirational corporate propaganda that surrounds them. Of course, it's an entirely different world for the maintenance workers, who operate in the vacuum, persistently aware of the oppressive nothingness that surrounds them. Ironically, the sections of the game with the most atmosphere also tend to have the least of it. Many of the best and most memorable quests in the game originate from the crew quarters, since this area of the station lets Morgan see what all her former subordinates did in their spare time. In fact, one of my favorite missions requires you to collect samples of your crew member Danielle Show's voice so you can synthesize a vocal passphrase. It naturally guides the player toward learning about the crew. They had a fitness center, a large pool, a well-stocked cafeteria, and a music lounge where they could dance, drink, and have fun. All these details make Talos 1 feel organic and expertly designed, like you could learn something about the people who lived in it by looking at how they entertained themselves. Several key crew members even hosted their own tabletop RPG, a cute bonding activity that culminates in a fascinating treasure hunt based on each of the characters. Of course, in a game that takes the time to name every single human character on the station, it shouldn't be surprised that any given character has a depth of personality you wouldn't have expected. If their fates hang in the balance, then choosing to sacrifice them should mean something. This dedication to characterization comes to a head when Morgan is asked to defend the last remaining survivors in the cargo bay from a massive Typhon attack. If you decide to help them make their final stand against the Typhon, then you're paying off the narrative weight that was established through exploration and personal investment. Sure, you can leave them behind and go your own way, but you know these are real people who had lives you're actively choosing to disregard by ignoring their request. It's a great showcase for the freedom of choice that Prey rewards, especially during the standoff. You see, completing this mission requires that you place 3 turrets in the designated area. That's a pretty solid defense, but why stop there? If you've been carefully collecting resources like I have, then you could just make 6 turrets, toss a Typhon lure into the crowd, and watch all these high-level aliens get shredded to pieces in seconds. With good planning and resource management, Morgan steamrolled one of the toughest fights of the game. The survivors are so grateful that they almost forget how terribly you treated them when you were your old self.
Morgan is making her way to you now, warning you and anyone else, so you don't shoot her accidentally, or on purpose.
Yeah, that's something you slowly learn as you progress through the game. A lot of the crew really hate Morgan, and her brother Alex.
Show, Danielle, head of IT, dislikes you, dislikes Alex more. Need to find out why.
These science prodigy rich kids were apparently unbearable to work with, consistently pushing all the teams to the breaking point and waving away any concerns brought before them. Even as Morgan's sanity was left slowly dwindling after all the neuromod experiments, the Yu siblings maintained a dismissive attitude toward the possibility that the project was going less than beautifully. The tensions came to a head as the crew became increasingly uncomfortable with how unethical their research was. Most people would be reluctant to inject alien DNA into their bodies, especially when those aliens are black goo monsters biologically predisposed to kill without remorse.
The Typhon kill us without hesitation, but it's not because they're evil. They lack mirror neurons. There's one thing we can do that they can't. Empathize with the suffering of another living creature.
So to ensure a steady supply of volunteers, TranStar began forcibly conscripting the bodies of prisoners from around the world. As much of a blatant human rights violation as that would be on its face, the need for prisoners to serve as lab rats created some pretty heinous incentives for world governments. People in serious debt could volunteer to get their debt revoked once their dissection is finished. Political prisoners could be jettisoned into space, no longer causing trouble for their oppressive governments. And if for some reason you don't take TranStar at face value, you know, if you think a multinational biotech research company that conducts coerced human experiments might not operate at the highest ethical standard, then it's possible that the prisoners were given false inflammatory charges so no one would miss them when they were taken into an orbital gulag and force-fed mimics until they died or turned into phantoms. I mean, if you heard that someone who did this was going to disappear forever, probably suffering horribly the entire time, would you start asking questions or raising concerns? Yeah, didn't think so. But that's how these companies get away with their own heinous crimes.
I want you to keep an eye on Annalise Gallegos. Where she goes, hours she keeps, visitors.
I'll log everything on the security computer.
Good. Send me a report at the end of the week.
Yes, sir.
As you play through the story, it's devastating to learn just how many characters blame you for the deaths of their loved ones, arguably with good reason. Danielle Sho already hated you for being a horrible boss, but she also holds you responsible for the death of her girlfriend, Abigail Foy. After all, you did forcibly conscript the prisoner who, as revenge for the unethical treatment he endured, disguised himself as the station's cook, stole a crew member's identity, and lured Abigail to her death. In one of Prey's most outstanding quests, you can choose to help Danielle track down this killer. She might not be able to offer forgiveness while her life still hangs in the balance, but once you take responsibility for your actions, you can show her that you're worthy of earning it. In another case of dead loved ones, you even ordered the kill yourself. Michaela, with whom you once shared a romantic history, has a condition that makes her unfit for neuromod usage. This condition also causes her body to shut down unless she gets regular injections to maintain her neurological functioning. If Morgan chooses to track down Michaela's medication and save her, then the game reveals how the past version of Morgan ended up betraying her in the end. One of the prisoners under Morgan's supervision was Michaela's estranged father, a political prisoner who found himself aboard Talos 1. Her bond is already rocky with Morgan, since Michaela originally withheld information about her failing health before coming aboard Talos 1. Being responsible for her father's death is a terrible thing to discover. You can choose to erase the incriminating data, or own up to the actions of your past, and hope that your honesty is enough to salvage the relationship. These narrative choices and character interactions also highlight the internal tension of Prey. Who was the Morgan Yu that oversaw research on this space station? And who is the Morgan Yu currently under the player's control? How are they different? And how much of one Morgan was present in the other, whether they knew it or not? The first Morgan was highly intelligent but driven to a fault, pushed to extremes by her emotionally withholding parents, who also unfortunately belonged to the strict board of directors. For the record, these are the kinds of parents who would put a hit out on their own children if they threatened the company's bottom line, in case you were wondering how the Yu siblings turned out the way they did. This drive for profitable results above all else likely accelerated the collapse of Talos 1, and escalated the threat that the Typhon posed for humanity. This is a Morgan who was raised to chase her family's ambitions, and would never care about who she stepped on in pursuit of her family's acclaim. The head of a corporate system that chews through lives as it chases down money. That version of Morgan Yu probably wouldn't have bothered to save a crew member stranded in space, or give a second chance to a surviving prisoner. Her position on Talos 1 trained her not to care. This new Morgan, however, no one really knows what her full potential is. I mean, everyone saw her memory loss and personality change after repeated neuromod extractions. The player can even see these changes in December and January. The rogue operators that previous versions of Morgan used to keep her secrets and suspicions after each extraction. December wants to escape and blow the whistle on TranStar's experiments. January wanted Morgan to destroy the station, all the crew, and the Typhon with him. Purge everything her company learned from the record, and then purge the record. She can chase the paranoia and desperation of her previous selves, or she can find another way. This new Morgan can resist her parental and workplace expectations. She can protect those who trusted her, value their lives above her own safety and personal gain. Sure, it's extra work under some nerve-wracking time constraints, but for me, the opportunity to refute people's claims about who they think I am was too exciting to ignore. I even get to defy my expectations of myself, give people a moment of hope, despite dashing it later by destroying Talos 1. Or maybe not. My decisions turned this version of Morgan into a more hopeful character. Someone who believed her crewmates should be saved, and therefore could be saved when an opportunity presented itself. She would hold out for a chance to do right by the people she wronged. These empathetic decisions are especially remarkable if I've also chosen to accumulate several Typhon abilities. By all accounts past and present, the Typhon aren't supposed to have empathy. They're not supposed to feel remorse or second-guess their desire for blood and consumption. They kill and destroy simply because they are stronger than their victims. Might makes right is a fact of their genetics. However, the reality of Morgan's choices throws a wrench into that biological essentialism. Someone who at this point has mostly Typhon physiology is still capable of caring for others and will inconvenience themselves for the benefit of someone they called a friend. Even a nominally toxic idea like retribution still comes from interpersonal awareness and moral responsibility. Owing someone, feeling accountable for what happens to them, and pursuing an equitable moral outcome. Meanwhile, it doesn't take alien DNA to hurt others. Human beings are perfectly capable of killing each other and committing heartless atrocities, either by individual aggression or systemic dehumanization. This is where Prey's morality stands out from most conceptualizations of good and bad, really giving players something intelligent to chew on. In this game's worldview, the capacity for beneficence and malevolence are not invariably controlled by our genetics or by our personalities. We have consciousness and agency that exist despite our genetic code or neural pathways. Being fully human, being fully Typhon, or being some mix of both species does not determine my morality. I do. I may express my morality differently depending on my abilities, but the expression is mine alone. I choose to believe that I can save the remaining survivors. I can incapacitate the final boss and trick him into taking all of us back to Earth. I can reconcile my relationship with my brother, showing him a little more patience now that I know he and I weren't so different. I can even prove to myself through December and January that my hopelessness and suspicion were unwarranted. It's with this nuanced take on the nature versus nurture debate that I can approach the game's final question. In the post-credit epilogue, you are revealed to be a Typhon who may or may not have once been Morgan Yu. Unlike your Typhon brethren, you apparently didn't immediately kill every human who so much as looked at you. Because of this, Alex took you through a simulation of the events that led to the Typhon invasion of Earth, and asked how you would have handled the situation, trying to make sense of your anomalous personality. By watching your behavior, Alex and the other major characters, each represented by their operators, attempted to study what made you different from the humans and Typhon on Talos 1. The central mechanical conflict behind your ability upgrades, and the ever-present question looming behind the choices you made, were all a puzzle meant to illuminate the hidden elements of your consciousness. You are a unique creature, unlike anything either species has ever encountered.
That's the world today. We spent years trying to put what you can do into us. We never tried putting what we can do into you.
I don't know if this ending is actually controversial, or if it feels like it should be controversial, because the "it was all a simulation" ending is an unpopular trope. Maybe there are some truly egregious examples of the simulation being used as an excuse to claim that nothing truly mattered, but I feel like the anger toward the trope has long outlived anyone using it at face value. I think Prey 2017 gave closure for the external and internal tension with two different endings. The external tension was obvious. I saved the surviving crew, I got the main characters to trust me, I reunited with my asshole brother, and I managed to neutralize the Typhon without destroying Talos 1. All pretty neat. As a culmination of all my choices up to that point, the ending I got was satisfying. I didn't need the game to list off my choices in the end credits to feel like they mattered, but sometimes that's just what the people want. No big deal. The twist reveal, however, felt like the game asking me what I thought about the internal tension of the entire experience. Who was Morgan Yu? What combination of human and Typhon shaped Morgan into the person who could make the decisions she made? Both species are capable of violence, but the Typhon seem cold and unfeeling compared to the humans, whose emotions and institutions make them uniquely capable of cruelty and malice. For someone who's injected so many neuromods in her life, it's very hard to tell where Morgan's humanity ended and the alien began, and where the ability to do good comes from within the whole mixture. I'm not sure what exactly causes me to act the way I do. My brain chemistry, my personality, my upbringing all play a role, no doubt, but the precise combination of each remains unclear. I have guesses, but as Alex concluded, it's hard to tell what motivates us. Are there thoughts I don't have access to because I'm not predisposed to see them as possibilities? Am I physically or mentally capable of being my own version of good? Or had the institutions I belong to already decided for me? It's hard to tell where my thinking and decision-making is bounded. I only know that when I was given a choice, I chose what felt right to me. Ultimately, in true imsim fashion, Prey leaves that final choice up to you. Were all your deeds an honest reflection of who you are as the next step in human Typhon evolution? Or was the kindness just a manipulation you performed to earn the trust of your next meal? I feel like with a little bit of thought and appreciation for the themes at play, this simple choice carried with it the weight of the game's biggest ideas up to this point. After our exploration of Talos 1 and our interactions with its crew, its leaders, and its invaders, what did we have to say for what we've witnessed? Are we really something special? Something different enough to change the universe? Or are we just another variant of the same old drives for violence, consumption, and reproduction? Player choice isn't always necessary to tell a good video game story, but in this case, I'm glad I got to believe that humanity was more than just the sum of its biological building blocks. More than just a corporate boardroom's malformed idea of human transcendence. Looking back, maybe I could have spent more time looking at Prey's flaws. That feels like the kind of thing a game critic is supposed to do. Maybe I should have complained about the pacing in the second or third act, as though any game can ever get released without some dweeb complaining about pacing issues. I mean, if I ever get bored with the side content, then I can choose to advance the main story. That's literally the appeal of immersive sims. And honestly, I don't really have a problem with the hacking minigame, since it's just an extension of the slow and deliberate pace that the rest of the game takes with all its mechanics. If I'm already on board for the sneak attacks and thoughtful combat strategy, then playing a little game to unlock a door isn't much more time-consuming, you know? Lastly, maybe the military operators would have bothered me at the end if I weren't fully stocked up on disruptor ammo. I mean, just look at this. The most annoying enemies in the endgame reduced to comedy just by selecting the right weapon. I don't know, it's hard to look at these nitpicks like they're substantive critiques that distract from the overall greatness of the whole game, but I felt like if I didn't at least bring them up, it would be a little negligent, considering these are issues that have been discussed before by other reviewers. The only major critique I have of Prey is the same critique I typically offer to all immersive sims, and thus becomes my warning to all of you watching this video. The games in this deified pinnacle of design philosophy are not made for people with any kind of perfectionistic tendencies. Prey has a lot in common with the Rorschach tests it contains, in that the game compels you to project your standards and expectations onto it. Are you okay with taking damage or dying? Are you okay with not being the strongest, most capable being in the room? Can you leave a task behind and come back for it when you're better able to handle it? Can you change your approach if your preferred playstyle isn't working out for you? Are you playing how you want to play, or how you think you should play? Depending on your answers, the biggest enemy you'll face in any imsim will be your own limiting tendencies and excessively rigid rules. Basically, if you're the type of person who looks to see if there's a trophy for completing the game without killing anyone, then please reconsider that approach before picking up Prey or any immersive sim at all. They're easy to hate when the first thing you do is set an impossibly high bar for yourself before you even know how to play, and then inevitably get demoralized when the game doesn't reward you for your can-do spirit. Imsims are made for the patient. You need to tolerate unreasonable horseshit early on, so 10 hours later you feel like a god when you finally overcome it. You almost need to approach the game scientifically. Experiment with how the systems work and in what ways they work with each other. You need to roll with the punches and treat mistakes like a chance to learn rather than a sign of failure. Deathloop is the second best arcane game because of how effectively it removed the need for perfectionism. Starting over and trying again is part of the story. The time loop on Black Reef made death meaningless, so whenever Colt died, he had no choice but to find amusement in his blunder and do something different the next time. That, more than anything, will help you cultivate the mentality needed to appreciate imsims for their breadth of choice, rather than making them seem like 1,001 ways to remind you of your own inadequacy. If you want to understand why this weird pseudo-genre commands so much attention in critical gaming circles, then Prey is a great place to start. It preserves the choice-driven mechanical interconnectedness you sickos crave, while also having modern concessions for the players who were still in elementary school when the original Deus Ex came out. I know certain gamers might regard non-lethal weapons that work when you ask them to as a luxury for baby casuals, but as someone currently fighting an uphill battle against enjoying the original Deus Ex, I prefer the new generation's focus on direction, reliability, and clear player feedback. It's also nice to play an imsim with a little more to offer than just stealth sequences. I know there's a stealth option for sneak attacks, but by now there should be more interesting choices for players to make than how long and how effectively they can hide. Prey 2017 was a pretty strong starting point for imagining something different, if only a little. And if there were any game that made me get what immersive sims were about, then this is it.